Thank you. My name is Josh Findlay. I'm the director of the Texas Public Policy Foundation's new Election Integrity Program. Thank you. TPBF has been doing election integrity for a while in Texas under the direction of Chuck DeVore. But I have to thank a lot of people for starting this new election protection program, is what we call it, the Election Protection Project. For the first time, we are running a national election integrity operation. So while we're based in Texas, we want to export the best ideas from Texas to Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Nevada. This is a key year to start this, right? TPBF is known as a research organization, but I love something that Greg said in a video that we watched yesterday. We're not a think tank, but we're also a do tank. And this is the mandate of what our project is. We are performing research, we are connecting grassroots ideas with practical solutions. But our goal at the end of the day always is to make a difference in election integrity in 2024 and beyond. To that end, we've invited a great panel with us today. These are people that I am so excited to have a conversation with because they are working on cutting-edge things in the field of election integrity. These are some of the best practitioners out there today. They're not just thinking about solutions, but they were invited today because they are all working on solutions. We're gonna have time for Q&A at the end, but I'd like to get started right now by giving them the opportunity to introduce themselves, their organizations, and talk a little bit about what they're working on and their successes. So Ken, would you like to start? And then we'll go Ashley and Jean.
Good morning, I'm Ken Cuccinelli. I lead the Election Transparency Initiative. It is a joint project of Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life and the American Principles Project, two organizations you all have probably heard of. And the Election Transparency Initiative was begun right after the 2020 election in response to our members' reaction to the need to get in and make elections cleaner, fairer, more accountable, more secure, more transparent. That's reflected in our name, Election Transparency Initiative. We want them so transparent that the only thing you don't see in an election is how I mark my ballot, right down to the computer code used on any computers used in the election, all open source, all open to the public, all auditable, all easily accessible by citizens. And we work on that as elections are run on a state-by-state basis. And we have the benefit of building on top of the 30 years of grassroots work by Susan B. Anthony and the American Principles Project. And so we have tools in place already and a 1 million person membership that I stepped into the benefit of that we harness to get the laws changed one law at a time, one state at a time, all across the country. And Josh named, of course, some swing states and priority states, but we will work anywhere, and we have members in every state. Before I was Virginia's Attorney General, I was in our state Senate, and I know from personal experience that a tactic we use quite regularly, which is finding people in a state legislator's district who agree with us, regardless of their own partisan affiliation. All we care is that they agree with us, and connecting them personally to their legislators, literally on opposite ends of the phone, which we do expertly and regularly. And having been a state senator, and I know you have legislators here, they'll tell you that it doesn't take hearing from many of your actual constituents to really take notice of an issue. And particularly on the right side of the aisle, this issue is still very resonant. In primaries in particular, they matter. The Republican activist base, people like you and beyond, you all are representative of tens of millions of people who still care passionately about this issue. And I personally have worked with TPBF in Texas for legal changes, but also it is a real encouragement, and I know the other panelists would agree, to have TPPF engaging now nationally with somebody who's recognized and respected in Josh leading the effort. So I want to thank Greg and your board for bringing TPPF outside of Texas again. I first had that experience on Right on Crime, working with TPPF nationally, and I'm so glad to see that kind of effort in the election space as well. So it has been, in my experience, the most, well, those of us right of center have worked together better on this issue since 2020 than any other issue I have ever seen. I usually characterize myself as conservative, and I am, but this has been way beyond just conservatives. And that continues apace and needs to continue into 2025 and beyond. And we'll talk about why that is later on. But it's a very welcome addition to the national fight. So thank you all for your support of that effort.
Good morning. My name is Ashley Hayek. I'm the Chief Engagement Officer for the America First Policy Institute, Brooke Rollins Group, as well as the Executive Director of its sister organization, America First Works. It's our advocacy arm. On our C3 side for the past, since we launched in 2021, we've been focusing on making it easy to vote and hard, if not impossible, to cheat. And one thing is certain, 2020, there was a lot of cheating that we saw. Josh and I had the opportunity to work on the Trump campaign together in 2020, and when things started going sideways, they went sideways fast. But what was interesting was in 2019, we saw in the legislatures how they were already thinking about ballot harvesting. They were already thinking about mail-in ballots. They were already thinking about curing the vote. COVID just gave them the opportunity to expedite all of those things in a way that in many times were unconstitutional. Now, looking ahead, we have such an amazing opportunity, and really, this election is a big math problem, and that's how we like to view it. At America First Works, we launched Project 19 and determined the 19 counties that will ultimately decide the future of our country. And if you think about that, of the 3,100 counties across the country, only 19 will decide the future of our country. In states like Arizona, the difference was 10,000 votes. That little. 10,000 votes. If we would have gotten 10,000 more votes in Arizona in 2020, 13 Marines would be alive and Laken Riley would be alive today. That's the difference. So looking ahead, making sure we have poll watchers, poll workers, our elections are safe and secure, there's no cheating is a top priority, and making sure we get every single ballot is absolutely critical. Other than my work with AFPI and AFW, I'm the proud wife of a U.S. Marine. I always have to point that out, and a mom of 5 kids.
Well, good morning. I'm Gene Hamilton. I am the Executive Director of America First Legal. Some of you might recognize us for some of our work that we've done here in the state of Texas and nationwide. Stephen Miller and I formed America First Legal 3 years ago. After serving from day one of the Trump administration until the last day, across the board, what we were confronted with on policy after policy after policy was a barrage of litigation, injunctions. We couldn't so much as hold a press conference without some judge in San Francisco telling us, no, you can't. So when we were leaving the administration, we looked around and we said, now, wait a second, there's kind of an established conservative legal world. But why don't we have what the left has? Why don't we have the same capabilities that they've had for decades? So let's start something. So we did. And I am very proud and humbled to say that we have been resoundingly successful so far in just 3 years in winning battles and winning court cases across the spectrum, across many legal issues that have made a major difference in the United States. In fact, just yesterday, the New York Times wrote up a profile of us, I think intended as a hit piece, We wear it as a badge of honor. It's great. It's full of fantastic sound bites for us. But look, we are invested in a lot of issues. So whether that's stopping DEI and trying to enforce our laws that ensure that every citizen across the United States is treated equally. We're representing the great state of Texas in 4 different lawsuits against the Biden administration regarding its unlawful immigration policies, its intentional destruction of our border in our immigration system. We do a lot of different things. Now, we are engaging in a critical election battle right now in the state of Arizona. We have a lawsuit, a major lawsuit, and for all the reasons that my other panelists have mentioned, is very important because Arizona, the difference between victory and defeat in that one state came down to just a few thousand, 10,000, 20,000 ballots. So we have sued Maricopa County, where so many of these problems are. We've also sued Yavapai County. We've sued Coconino County. And we are going to take action to ensure that state and county officials actually abide by the laws that their legislatures pass. This is a key and critical issue that's not just present in the election integrity space. This is an issue that's present across the legal spectrum. Your laws are only so good as your government's ability to enforce them. And if your government refuses to enforce the laws that the legislature passes, they're worthless. They're absolutely worthless. And so what we're trying to do in Arizona is ensure that these counties comply with their legal obligations so that every citizen's vote counts and that it doesn't count multiple times. So look, we are involved in a lot of stuff across legal issues. I could spend a lot more time talking about some of those issues, and I'm happy to as time goes on. But I just want to emphasize to this group, who I know understands this to your core, that the importance of this issue, of having elections that are fairly administered, that citizens can have confidence in the outcome, could not be a more important battle. And if we lose this battle in the year 2024, we might not get another chance in the future to make things right without substantial social unrest, without substantial other problems. And so it's incumbent upon all of us in each of our own spaces, in each of our own worlds, to do everything we can between now and Election Day and thereafter to ensure that at least we have a fair fight, we have a fair process, and that the citizens can be confident in the outcome of their elections.
Thank you. I hope you all were able to see the top-notch quality of the practitioners we brought in. So Ken, let's start the conversation. A lot of the times we hear, it seems like our side is always playing catch-up on election integrity. Feels like we're behind. Can you tell us why that is the case? If that is the case, why that is?
Yeah, it feels like we're behind because we're behind. You know, the discussion in all of the circles we all travel in this subject has really revolved around from 2020's election onward. And in answer to your question, Josh, the way we got here is the left began before the 2004 election systematically attacking the election process. They believe process is the way to win, and they have proved it. And I'll give you a number of examples. You all know George Soros' name. He was a primary funder of when this began. It began in Colorado. some of you may have heard of, I forget the exact name of it, Turn Colorado Blue Plan. It was wrapped up with that as well. They were involved in Secretary of State races a decade and a half before we were. They have been, they still outmatch us on the litigation side. They know, and I won one of my state Senate races in a contest, in a recall, not a recall, a recount. Every single contested election is a lawsuit. And why do they want muddy voter rolls? They want muddy voter rolls so they can commit fraud, so that outcomes are in doubt. And anything in doubt in an election gets thrown into the litigation arena, where they have built up a massive advantage. Now, people like Gene and other organizations on the right, including, and this is the only compliment I have ever paid RNC in my entire life, and I'm not kidding about that, is they have beefed up their ability to fight. They're in more than 80 cases since 2020. And it's important that parties get in these because you have standing that none of the rest of us can bring. So sort of visually, I would say, you know, before 2020, the litigation difference left to right was here, and we've gotten to about here. So, and it drives them crazy that we're even closing in on them, which is a nice bonus. But the point here is they have literally been doing this for 20 years. We've been doing it for 3. And they've brought billions of dollars to bear on this subject. We have so far collectively brought tens of millions of dollars to bear on this subject. And so the way we got here and the 2019 litigation and so forth, and in the COVID litigation, they were built for that moment. And boy, what was the Emmanuel quote? Never let a good crisis go to waste. They didn't. And it wasn't that they got legislatures to change laws. It's what Gene said. They got their allies to disobey their own laws on the books. What good is a law if government won't follow the law? Now, it's worth keeping in mind, government is the biggest lawbreaker on the planet, and elections are not an exception. And so we need front side of the election lawsuits like Gene was talking about. We need to be on offense, and we are on offense now. And we've never been on offense before in the last 20 years. But the left has been. Capital Research Center is a really geeky research group, and they've tracked this money. And the 501c3s, about $5 billion worth. The 501c4s, another $5 billion worth on the left. They're not fighting this fight in elections. They're fighting it with nonprofits and that are supposedly supposed to be nonpartisan as well. So they've built up this, I mean, this is a David and Goliath fight here. It's good to be on the side of truth and right, but it'd be nice to be bigger. And that's also why the addition of TPPF to this effort, the expansion beyond Texas, is so important. We have to keep growing the efforts right of center because the way we got here is the left built their way to this problem. And they want it muddy. They want it messy. They benefit from chaos because all chaos is essentially thrown into the courts where they still have a litigation advantage. We're closing the gap, but we have a long way to go.
Thanks, Ken. That was a perfect summary. So Ashley, let me ask you this. I know one thing that both of our organizations are very proud of is that we have been on the ground for more elections than any other entities this cycle. You know, we started jointly in 2023 getting on the ground for elections. What's happening on the ground right now, both from our side and the other side? What are you seeing?
Yeah, well, first of all, to your point, going back a little bit, in March of 2021, Joe Biden signed an executive order that basically weaponizes the government to use every single agency to not just register votes, but to mobilize voters, harvest votes, turn out the vote, et cetera. So AFPI spent a lot of time passing legislation to make sure you had signature verification, to ban Zuckerbucks. But to Ken's point, they're always 2 steps ahead. We don't need an NGO. We'll just use the government. It's fine, and we'll make sure to get the people that are on governmental programs to buy into what we're selling. AFPI, our litigation center, has filed a lawsuit with some legislators out of Pennsylvania to challenge that, which is just another step, hopefully, in the right direction, but there's just so much work that has to be done. Going into the states, so America First Works and TPPF have been in 7 battleground states since late 2023. We've been in the the processing centers with eyes on what exactly is happening. The scary part is no one's there. No one's there. There's no poll watchers and poll workers. There's no party apparatus that's showing up. A lot of the state parties are broke. The county parties are broke. There's no money in the system. No one is taking the time to do the poll watching programs. And so there's a major deficit in terms of making sure we have people proactively watching what's happening as the ballots are being counted. Another thing that we found is that the left is being more aggressive on ballot curing. So for example, in some states like Wisconsin, as soon as a ballot is taken out because they need to verify a signature or something's wrong, the poll worker for the Democrats will scurry over, get the information so they can go and fix that ballot. We're not doing that. We are so far behind, but the good thing is we've put together an election integrity checklist. We've distributed it to all of our Republican county parties. They're using that to check the machines ahead of time. One county that we were in with Josh last year, this county is known for having the best election integrity, no problems. So we were very optimistic this is a good test run. Okay, Mrs. Chairwoman, what types of issues do you have with the machines? We have no problems with the machines here. Oh, okay. You had no issues with any of the ballots. Nope, no problems. Well, the ballots actually didn't fit into the machines, but we used scissors and we cut the ballots, and it was fine. We got it to fit. That's a problem that you have to be proactive about. And so we were able to update our checklist and make sure they're checking the machines. You have to have a representative of the party to be able to go and do a lot of those tours ahead of time, but being able to arm them with the knowledge of what you are allowed to ask for, it's kind of like the administration, right? If you don't know what to ask for, you're always going to be behind. So those are some of the things that we're seeing, but there's nothing that's happening at this point that's not fixable.
And to follow up a little bit, what are we seeing from the Democrat side?
They're organizing. They're using lawfare to challenge everything. April 2nd in Wisconsin, there's the ballot initiatives to determine the drop boxes and some other issues. So they are actively looking at what ways they can skirt around the rule of law. They're making sure that they have enough poll watchers in place. And then in some places, they've put in programs like in Pennsylvania where they're paying college students to be the poll watchers and poll workers. And that's extremely alarming. We're trying to counter and say, well, if college workers can get paid, why can't moms get paid? Let's get some Moms for Liberty and Moms for America out there to start watching these polls.
Yeah, the Department of Education just put out a toolkit on how to hire students to do voter registration, right? To the discussion about using government resources for GOTV activity. So, Jean, we hear a lot about election litigation, and we hear a lot about how that is our main tool to fight back. Tell us what kind of cases are being, well, first of all, what are the main election integrity issues that you can litigate on, and what kind of cases are being filed to combat the things that the other side is doing, or to protect our rights?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And it varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But I think that if you look for common themes on both sides, you're going to have issues with voter list maintenance, whether states are doing what they're supposed to be doing to ensure that the voter rolls are actually right, and that they actually have real people and not people who aren't supposed to be on there. And so you have people on some sides trying to ensure that states do their job and delete voters who are no longer living there or who are dead or across the spectrum. And then you also have challenges from the other side of people who say that when You're taking people off too soon. You're doing the wrong things by taking folks off the list. And so you get that kind of offensive and defensive voter roll registration type of litigation kind of across the board from both sides, I think. You also have a lot of other issues related to registration. I know, for example, in the state of Georgia, there is a case that's going to trial, I believe, in the next couple of weeks here, that relates to Georgia's procedure for ensuring that voters on their rolls are citizens. And look, I mean, we know that the left does this type of thing, but to them, it's the most abhorrent thing you could ever do is verify citizenship of every Georgia voter who's registering to vote. So you have challenges like that. You also have a lot of things like what we have now in our own case, and the case like we brought in Pennsylvania in the 2022 cycle, which is proactive, affirmative cases that are designed to ensure that officials comply with the law. And so when you have a place that, for example, maintains unstaffed drop boxes, but the state law or the county law says, no, in fact, drop boxes are supposed to be monitored and secured. Let me just take a step back here. Whether it's this issue or whether it's other issues, one thing I want to emphasize, and if you take one thing away from this panel, from my remarks today, I want it to be this. If you think someone else is going to do it, you're wrong. No one else is going to do it. No one else is going to bring that lawsuit. No one else is going to go out there and watch that poll location. No one else is going to ensure that these drop boxes are being monitored. It's on each and every one of us to do our own part, because the left has this infrastructure that Ken and Ashley have described. We are still so far behind them in this. And one of the things that the right has tended to do across issue areas is to sit back and assume that someone else has it. Someone else is going to file that lawsuit. Someone else is going to do this. Oh, surely the government is going to protect us. They're not. No one else is going to do it. And so our motto at America First Legal is always much along the mindset of, if we don't do it, who else will? And so when you have that mindset and you have that frame of reference, that springs you into action, and that leads you to do things and to bring challenges and to do things to ensure that whatever the issue area, someone is involved in fighting for the right thing. Someone is involved in doing good and not letting evil get executed and perpetrated amongst the American people. And so I will just say, the issues that these cases are bringing up, we need more lawsuits. We need more. We need more proactive, affirmative lawsuits, because we have documented failures in past elections in all kinds of states across the board. We know what happened, and that's like in Maricopa County with paper size of the ballots at these voting centers, where they don't even have enough ballots of the right size to fit in the scanners, like a very basic thing. So there is a documented history in each state, in different counties and different jurisdictions, of failures. We need to be on offense going into every single one of those places and doing proactive litigation before Election Day, way before Election Day, to ensure that this is on the radar and that a judge sitting there has the ability to issue fast and immediate relief that corrects the situation, so that we're not playing catch up after Election Day trying to change the outcome of an election that's been certified. It's tough. The courts aren't going to go for it. And so what you have to do is you have to be on offense. I mean, sure, you can do your best to protect on defense. You can do your best to try to fix things after the fact. But the more that we can do now in more states, the better. And so my request to all of you would be to go ahead, find an organization that you think is going to do good work in this space, and get behind them. Get behind them with your prayers, get behind them with your financial resources, get behind them with your energy, because we need it. We need it. The stakes could not be higher.
Could I offer a couple of cross comments? One, I'm a data hound. So to Gene's point about voter rolls, there is not a single state in America that has decent voter rolls, or even close. And it's very hard, actually. 2% of Americans move every month. So in a 2-year congressional cycle, think about what that means for your voter rolls. That's enormous. And even on our side, where we've had a lot of success improving the election environment, we can't get outside this cultural notion in government that you rely on government to fix the problem. If you want to sell something on Amazon, they aren't going to go check the post office's NCOA list to see if you actually live where you say you live. They're going to run you through 100 databases. They're going to do it in one day, and they're going to nail down the answer to that question with 99.99% accuracy. We are still relying on government solutions to government problems, and we need to be looking outside of government. You know, I was at the breakfast. Government shouldn't be using databases for some things and building some databases, but on voter rolls, they should be using every commercial tool cost-effectively available to ensure that they're accurate. And the other side does not want that. As Gene said, they don't want accuracy. They do not want accuracy. And so this is a real challenge, and no matter what anybody in any state tells you, they do not have clean voter rolls. Or if they do, wait a month, and then they don't. So, and therefore they don't. The last thing I would add is the thing you can do. Every single person in this room can be an election official. If you're worried about how people are going to count ballots, well, then go count the ballots. You can do it where you live, even if you live in Harris County, Texas, where they give awards to people, election officials, who lose 10,000 ballots. Nonetheless, every single county in America, every city, hires its own citizens to run the elections because it takes that many people. And even more important than poll watchers, which are partisan, you're on the Republican team, presumably, election officials are the actual government employees who run the election. And Virginia, we had our election laws radically changed in the 2 years of government Democrat control, same thing. In 2019 era, 70 changes to our elections. And yet we had a sweep in 2021 statewide in close elections. All those were 1 to 2% wins. Glenn Youngkin, Winsome Sears, Jason Miyares. And how did that happen? Well, the way it happened is 4,000 people stepped forward, got trained, and invaded election offices in the target areas of Virginia where we expect the most problems. Without a single change in the law, we helped Virginia have the most secure elections it had had in a long time just by invading the space with trained election officials.
Hey, Josh, to add, since this is conversational, in Nevada, when we went, so there is no reason why the elections in November should have any issues if we are practicing in the presidential primaries and the primary elections leading up to November. So our two organizations have been on the ground to practice best practices and to see where we have deficiencies. What's interesting to your point, when we were in Nevada, we saw that all of a sudden when the teams walked up, and by the way, TPPF was the only group that brought poll watchers with them. There was no other poll watchers in Clark County. All of a sudden, they started checking the verification, the signatures a little bit slower. They were paying a little bit closer attention because they had eyes on them and they knew it. And so making sure you're present is the #1 thing that you can do.
Yeah, because what people want to like catch somebody, but what actually happens is they stop misbehaving. So a little Attorney General experience, higher penalties don't deter crime. objective likelihood of getting caught doesn't deter crime. The belief in the likelihood of getting caught changes behavior. It changes behavior. So, Ashley's observed experience is completely consistent with what I've also seen on the other side of the country. You can make a difference, and so can people like you all over the country.
So Ken and I worked on that race in Virginia together, and the Washington Post wrote an article about the things that we worked on. And the Washington Post never wants to say anything good about us, right? But they interviewed the Fairfax County election administrator, and he said kind of jokingly, yeah, we had to do everything by the book this time because we knew people were watching us. That wasn't a joke to us.
And that's the county, million people, which is the biggest county in Virginia, where we caught the biggest election fraud of that cycle. And it was one of those newly trained election officials that spotted that they were not obeying the voter ID laws for absentee ballot requests. And literally in Fairfax, as I recall, was over 300 of those ballots. And one of the things we learned was that it was also going on in other counties, lo and behold. And literally just people being determined and trained and prepared and present made the difference. It made the difference.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I'm going to direct this question a little bit to everybody, but Ashley, I think you can start if you'd like. What has changed since 2020 that should give us hope for 2024, if anything? I don't want to paint a rosy picture if there's not, but what has changed that should give us hope?
So there has been a significant amount of legislation that has passed. The signature, the voter ID, for example, banning Zuckerbucks, and across the country, there's a lot that has been done to secure elections. I think Ken pointing out the lawsuits, the lawfare that's happening from the right has been leaps and bounds better. One thing that we've been really focused on is bringing the movement together. So how do we, as a conservative movement, work together so that we make sure we know who's doing what where, and we can be coordinated like never before? And that's something that's really been missing, I think, from the conservative movement for so long. We've all been so siloed in our own little lanes trying to figure out, where should I do my next event, as opposed to having a fully coordinated effort. So that is something that's completely new that's going to give us such an advantage. We are going to be outspent. We will always be outspent. That will never probably change just because of how the system is set up. However, we are smarter, and we can be significantly more efficient if we just work together. And that's, I think, a big positive thing we have.
What I'd like to add really quick, that one thing that I love about all three of your organizations is you have really been pioneers in this. And one thing that I want to share for our audience out here is you would probably be shocked at how little coordination there has been in election integrity on our side prior to this. But these three organizations were at a meeting last week with probably 20 other organizations to coordinate litigation. You had America First organizations there. You had traditional conservative organizations there. You had party organizations there. This is something that our side has never done before. And yet your three organizations, along with TPPF, you were there as well, have really tried to pioneer this collaboration. So thank you for all that you're doing with that. And I think that should give us some hope going forward. Ken or Jean, any other thoughts on this question?
I think that the emergence of some additional energy in litigation is also making an impact. And I think that it will make an impact. But again, as Ashley said, we're outgunned, quite frankly, in terms of the number of people, the amount of money that's behind what the left is up to. I mean, Mark Elias has an entire law firm with lots of money behind him. And he is going across the country fighting everywhere. We don't have something similar on our side. We are making steps. We're making progress. But we are doing at least something right now, which makes a huge difference. It is a David versus Goliath fight in all of these issues for the right. It absolutely is. We can win, and we will win. But again, from my standpoint, I think you absolutely just have to change your mindset, and you have to adopt the mindset of, what can I do in my own sphere of influence and in my own world to make a difference, because no one else is going to do it. If you want your state and your country to be a better place, you need to do something about it. No one else is going to. So I am very hopeful that in this crowd and across the country, there are lots of other folks who have adopted this mindset, who are ready to get behind more affirmative litigation efforts, ready to get behind more election monitoring efforts. Just across the board, lots more energy, because the alternative is not, I mean, there is no alternative. My own family, my kids are here, they're watching me this morning, and I want to leave this world a better place than I had. And the only way that we're going to do that is by fighting now. No one else is going to fight for your kids. You have to do it.
Yeah, I told you I'm a data hound. I like quantifying things. In 2020, I would give America a D grade for the election. And I think we're probably up to C+, B- range now. And we have a long way to go. And improvements are state by state. Texas, you all have made improvements. You still have a lot more to do. I mean, I make Harris County jokes. We could all make those all day, right? But that's half the size of Virginia, left essentially unpoliced and unaccountable. But the laws of Texas have improved substantially, as have Georgia, North Carolina, Florida, Arizona. So we can go around the country and find areas. Virginia and Pennsylvania both got rid of Zuckerbucks. And when we say Zuckerbucks, we all know what that means. But Zuckerbucks is Mark Zuckerberg's $400 million that was paid through nonprofits to government entities to turn out Democrat votes. And what they said they were doing is helping the election officials during COVID. Isn't that generous of them? And Zuckerbucks alone explains the outcome of the 2020 election. No Zuckerbucks, no question about Donald Trump winning. So it is that important. And over half the states have now banned Zuckerbucks. So now the left is looking at, well, how do we get around the Zuckerbucks bans? And so we've got Zuckerbucks 2.0 debates going on in Georgia and other places, and Biden Bucks, the government version of this from the executive order that Ashley referenced. But we are much better off. States were not better off in Michigan and Nevada. Nevada, in my opinion, holds the record, and I don't even think it's close, as running the worst elections in the country by far. And they are sufficiently out in front of the second place state that I don't even know who it is. And amazingly, they made things worse in the last couple of years. But in most of the country, we've seen improvements. And so there is reason to be optimistic. There is reason to be hopeful. And as we've already talked about, the other side knows we're watching now, and that actually plays a real role as well. Most people don't want to lie and cheat. It takes a special form of hardcore Marxist tyrannical bastard to want to be willing to do that. And that isn't all that common. So,
can I just say one more thing? You mentioned Michigan. We have such an incredible opportunity right now. Like, Joe Biden is horrific. And like last time he was, basement, like Sleepy Joe. This time he's just like a freaking disaster. If you look at the numbers in the primary, 100,000 voted for uncommitted. Donald Trump only lost that by about 75,000 votes. If things keep going down that path, if they keep dividing themselves from the inside out, like, we just have to make sure that the people are on the ground to secure the election, and this is ours. We have to bank the vote. It is done. They are falling apart at the seams because at this point, there's no amount of basement time that's going to continue to destroy their party.
Yeah, and in the presidential, keep in mind who some of these third-party contesters are. They're all leftists of one degree or another. Now, I happen to be on a COVID level, a fan of RFK, and that, he got that one right. But Cornel West, you've got the Green Party person, and they all know, the Democrat Party is a lot of their litigation right now is directed at those people and keeping them off the ballot and squashed and crushed as much as they possibly can. So ironically, the opponent of my opponent, I don't want to overstate this, we're all Americans, is our ally. The Green Party has a real interest in the Democrat Party not cheating. And you know, where do you think the Democrat Party normally gets its most radical people from? Well, now they're watching the Dems too. So for this election cycle, there are some really unusual dynamics, but I will express one of my concerns is that this not be a 2024 and done. Win, lose, or draw, you know, we started out with the history. How did we get here? The left has been doing this for 20 years, folks. If we don't view this as a permanent effort, then later on, when we fold our tents and go home, they will start racking up the unbegotten wins the way they've won some of these, like the Minnesota Senate seat for Al Franken, the governor's races in Washington State. We can go around the horn and identify races where these tactics have changed the outcome. We need to be in this for the long haul and permanent, which again is one reason I'm grateful to Greg and TPPF for bringing Josh in and the team. I know you got a whole team here to expand the effort beyond Texas. We need to be building for the future, not just fighting 2024, which we have to do, but we have to be looking beyond it because the left is too.
Perfect. Thank you. We've got a few time for questions. Oh, and people are jumping up. Let's go here in the front and then right at table 14.
Hi there, Patty Barrett from Harris County. There are 4 of us here from Harris County, all very active. 2 of us on the board of Citizens Defending Freedom, which is going after those 19 counties. I am also an advisor and consultant for Catherine Engelbrecht of True the Vote and a surrogate speaker for her. And one of the great disappointments that we have had is that when organizations like TPPF and America First and other organizations are saying we're going to do election integrity work, they, as a rule, ignore or turn their back on this person who's even been locked up. Do you see a way that your organizations are looking to collaborate with the Joan of Arc of election integrity? Trump recommends her all the time. She talks to Trump all the time. Where are we on collaborating with this heroic woman?
Sure, so I'll take that one since we're a Texas-based organization. So Catherine and I text pretty regularly. She's referred me to Sarah Scogan on her team, who we work with. Sarah and I try to talk about twice a month. Sometimes it doesn't happen quite that often. Some things that we're able to work on together, like the poll working and poll watching trainings and things like that, are excellent programs. They've got other litigation branches that, you know, we try to spread out our litigation operations so we're not stepping on each other's toes, let's say. But we love to engage with all types of grassroots organizations. In fact, one mandate that TPPF has specifically is that part of the reason we spend so much time on the ground in the various states is because we look to partner with grassroots organizations on all of our projects, right? We don't do anything on our own. Everything we do, we look to partner with somebody. And we have got quite the roster of partner organizations that we're working with. You know, some funny names like the Pigpen organization in Nevada is one we always laugh at, right? But we really value these citizen-minded groups, these grassroots groups that are doing the work on the ground. They're the ones that are in the election board offices, you know, every day watching things during the election. They attend all the election board meetings throughout the year. And we want to give these citizens that come up with great ideas and great projects resources and an avenue to really expand what they're working on. So we really value our partnerships with the grassroots, and we are looking at any organization that is willing to work with us to partner on all of these excellent projects.
Thank you. Bob Hall, State Senator here. Appreciate what y'all are doing. And I recognize that the issue where we are today, that litigation and increased public awareness with our elections is what we need to get us through this next election. But we've got to look, as you said, Ken, we've got to look beyond that. And here in Texas, we have a system that cannot be fixed. This is like having a boat with a bottom in it that's a screen door, trying to plug the holes in it. I wrote a paper last year, I call our elections the black box. There is no transparency, there's no accountability, and the outcomes are unknowable. Not unknown, unknowable. And our problem is not just fraud, it's error. We have a system that has no visibility to tell there's error. And it's happened because the last 125 years, every time we pass a new election law, it is for convenience. And we sacrifice security for convenience. We went to precinct voting, to countywide voting. We went to electronic machines, electronic poll books. Each one of those is for convenience. Long early voting period. What we need is a clean sheet approach to our elections. Don't try to fix what's on the books. Recognize that the two in-person voting processes and our mail-in ballots all have 3 sets of legislation in conflict with each other. We only need to have one in-person voting. 21 other states do it. And by having one in-person voting period, we can now run a zero tape before the precinct polls open. And when the polls close on election day, we can run the tally tape right there in the precinct and post the results of that precinct on the county website. We don't know what that is for several days now, and we don't know where the cards go or what anything is done to them. But if we anchor that, and then when we give the precinct data to the county for them to assemble the county vote, before the county can send it to the Secretary of State, the precinct judges all have to agree that the county is about to send what they gave them a few days before that. And the same thing at the state level. Before the state can put out what they have, then it has to be verified. You don't have to worry about people manipulating the votes or votes being sent to Slidell, Spain or anything like that when you have hard copy. And you did the voting back in the precinct on hand-marked paper ballots using a ballpoint pen. Why in the world do we need a $35,000 piece of electronic equipment to mark a ballot? And when it marks the ballot, it doesn't tell us anything. For those that have those paper ballots, you read down at the bottom of it, you saw what you voted for, and you feel really good about that, don't you? I call that the feel-good section, because it has nothing to do with your vote being advanced to the counting machine. It's done with the QR code. We've been bamboozled by the manufacturers with that. So with hand-marked paper ballots on secure paper that are sequentially numbered and signed by the judge, you have a real control over what's going into it. You have the follow-up all the way on. And it's read right there in the precinct on a dumb optical reader. Not internet capable in no way at all, not software programmed. It'll be hardwired programmed, so it can't be reprogrammed. And you print those ballots, you now have your vote marked with your hand as the anchor for what your vote is, verified with that tape that's run, posted immediately, and you can now have confidence that your votes are actually getting to the Secretary of State to be posted. But it takes a complete change of our system to do it. In the meantime, I agree with everything you're saying about litigation and people showing up. Be a trained poll worker. Don't just say, I'll go down there and help that day. Learn what to look for and fill that hole between now and then so that the next elections, this next session, we can go in and revamp all of what we do to have a system that eliminates error, because our system is just as prone to error as it is to fraud. That's my 2 cents.
Amen, brother. I mean, I agree passionately with everything you just said. I'm a big believer in the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. And there's a reason for that. And there's a reason the other side wants complexity. We don't need 45 days of early voting. There's just no rational reason for that. I picked that number because in Virginia, that's one of those changes they made in that 2-year period I mentioned to you. But look, for us at Election Transparency Initiative, the gold standard is very simple. Paper ballot, marked as you described, and that is the official ballot. Run through a dumb tabulator, because before I went to the dark side and went to law school, I was an engineer, and I can tell you that a machine will make less mistakes than a human, but you still don't make it official. So you can audit it, and it's those pieces of paper that you mark that should be the ballot. That is the official ballot. And of course, saved for 2 years and those kinds of things. And keep it all simple. And less voting time in person is, of course, more secure. Jimmy Carter knew that mail-in voting was the most prone to fraud. I mean, the Carter-Baker Commission of 2005, which was full of people that, frankly, all of us might generally scoff at for policy purposes, and yet, if you read that report, you might have thought Gene Ashley and I wrote it. So, I mean, it was very objective and pointed out a lot of the weaknesses the senator just pointed out. And of course, now in Texas, I don't want to invade too much. Virginia, we're a Dillon rule state, which means the localities can't do anything they don't get permission from the state to do. You all have a lot more local independence, and in the election space, that may not be such a great thing, frankly. But simple is always better. It is always, always, always better.
One more thing, though. While we have 45 days, you better use those 45 days. Because if we only give ourselves 1 day to vote and the left gives themselves 45 days to vote, we lose. If the left is completely capitalizing on mail ballots and we're not, we lose. When I'm a mail-in, not like a man, but a mail-in voter, and in Virginia, when I went to turn in my ballot, because I forgot to mail it, there was a poll watcher volunteer at my polling place telling people, wouldn't it be so much easier if you just voted by mail for the people who are voting on election day? So the left wants more people to vote by mail because it is easier to cheat. There's more ballots in the universe, and we have to take advantage of every possible tool in our tool belt if we want to win.
And they don't have principles on the other side. If you beat them in the 45-day voting, suddenly they will discover a reason to get rid of 45-day voting. If you beat them at mail-in voting, they will agree with you that we should get rid of mail-in voting. I promise you, we have to get better than them at all their little schemes, and that is our path to actually get rid of them.
We're out of time, unfortunately. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for joining us today, and get involved in your elections. It's the only way we're going to win. Thank you.